Seltzer Kings
podcasts.
This message comes from Greenlight. Ready to start talking to your kids about financial literacy? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app that teaches kids and teens how to earn, save, spend wisely, and invest, with your guardrails in place. With Greenlight, you can send money to kids quickly, set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on your kids' spending with real-time notifications. Join millions of parents and kids building healthy financial habits together on Greenlight. Get started risk-free at greenlight.com/Spotify.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Oh, don't get your knickers in a twist, Gavin. None of this would have happened if it weren't for British Petroleum. Ass. The following podcast contains...
Oh, that is terrible. That's the most appalling, disgusting, revolting thing I've ever seen.
explicit language. Hello and welcome to the podcast that asks a simple question. When you told us the president was too senile to have committed the crime, what the hell were you thinking? I'm your host, Dave Bledsoe, and this is episode number 494, Ollies' Big Idea. It's part one of Iran Contra, the show where we explain the scandal that should have brought down the Reagan administration but didn't. Iran Contra. Stay tuned. The What the Hell Are You Thinking podcast is brought to you by returning sponsor Secondhand Booms, your source for pre-owned military hardware. Are you a developing nation with a big need for weapons but only a small budget to buy? Are you a despot unfairly blacklisted from the international arms market? Secondhand Booms is the solution to all your arsenal issues. Our equipment is older, gently used, and excellently maintained. From rifles to armored vehicles, from air defense to anti-ship, Secondhand Booms has what you need to equip your militia, guerrilla band, or Revolutionary Guard, all at great prices. Will you be able to go up against American Special Forces? No. But you can dominate your neighbors or your citizens just fine. Secondhand Booms. Our guns aren't new, but you know what? They'll do.
Today, it was the end of a long and at times terrifying 17-day ordeal. Tom Brokaw reports from Damascus.
The ancient road to Damascus. Tonight, a road to freedom for 39 American hostages. Once across the Syrian border from Lebanon, they felt great relief.
Feel very good. Yeah. Very good to be going home.
Then the hostages were brought here to another symbol of their new status, a luxurious Sheraton hotel in Damascus. First, they were welcomed by U.S. Ambassador William Eagleton. At a subdued news conference, TWA Captain John Testrake said he learned something from his captors.
We've found out things about our fellow man on the other side of the world that we didn't know. And we found that they're human beings. They have the same emotions, the same fears, the same hopes, the same expectations, the same dreams for their country as we all have.
And the question of retaliation. Should the United States strike back?
I don't seek any retaliation or revenge. I think all of the men here would like to see justice prevail. Justice and understanding, but more so than retribution, retaliation, or any other vengeful emotion.
One of the hostages held by the radical Hezbollah group said he was not mistreated, but Hezbollah has no love for the United States government.
As far as their attitude towards Americans, I think they like the people. I think it's the government they object to.
The first time I learned about the two sects of Islam was over breakfast at my friend John's house back in the mid-1980s.
How is this relevant?
It is, I promise. I was having breakfast at my friend's house, which I admit was a strange thing to be doing. I don't ever recall having breakfast there at any other time.
How is that fucking relevant?
I'm not sure. I'm moving on. You know, maybe it wasn't breakfast. Maybe it was dinner. But why would John be reading the paper? I'm reading the paper is kind of a morning thing.
Damn it, Dave.
Sorry. Yeah, either way, John was reading the paper, which is a thing people did back in those days, and he looked up at his dad, who was sitting at the table with us, and he asked, Dad, what's a shite?
That is a bad word.
And without even thinking about it, John's dad backhanded him right in the mouth.
It was the 80s.
It knocked John right out of his chair. I mean, John's dad didn't mean to knock him out of his chair. Honestly, he didn't even hit him that hard. It's just, it happened. John was so shocked by him being hit, he pulled back and knocked the chair over. You see, when you mean to mouth off to your dad, you prepare yourself for the pop in the mouth you know was coming your way.
Great parenting.
But John wasn't trying to be a smartass. He just didn't know what a shite was. And as he protested the unjust belt in the chops, he held up the paper and pointed out to his dad that he wasn't being a smartass. The word was right there in the paper. Shiite. Which to the uninitiated such as John sounded shite. In all honesty, I suspect that John kind of knew that it probably wasn't pronounced shite, but he took the chance that he might slip it past his old man on plausibility. But his old man had been stationed in the UK and knew that it was a Britishism for shit, ergo the pop in the chops. And his dad sort of apologized. He knew John better than I did and told him how to pronounce the word, and that it was a sect of the Islamic religion, and that was the end of breakfast. Now, all I knew is there was no way in hell I was going to bring up any of this to my dad because I wouldn't get a backhand to the kisser. That wasn't his way. But I did stand a decent chance of getting a belt to my ass with a bar of soap in my mouth, which is way worse than a belter across the mouth because the humiliation lasted longer.
Not how you raise a child.
So the mysteries of the Islam religion remained close to me for many more years. And that's understandable. I was a kid. I didn't work for the motherfucking White House. Which brings me to this week's topic. That time, the White House traded arms for hostages and used the proceeds from the illegal arms sales to illegally fund a war in Central America. It's a story of intrigue, espionage, international arms smuggling, and massive egos, all wrapped up in a conspiracy called the Iran Contra affair. But before we can talk about that, we need to talk about the National Security Council.
Let's not and say we did.
In the years following World War II, the United States realized that it was now the king turd of shit mountain. The old way of doing things just wasn't going to cut it anymore. Now that we were a superpower, we needed to get some organization to the entire national security apparatus, and Harry Truman shepherded through Congress the National Security Act of 1947. The law created the modern Department of Defense, broke the Air Force off into its own branch of the military, established the Central Intelligence Agency, and most importantly for our purposes this week, created an advisory committee to the president on all issues related to national security. According to Wikipedia, quote, the National Security Council was created in 1947 by the National Security Act. It was created because policymakers felt the diplomacy of the State Department was no longer adequate to contain the Soviet Union in light of the tension between the Soviet Union and the United States. The intent was to ensure coordination and concurrence among the Army, Marine Corps, Navy, Air Force, and other instruments of national security policy, such as the Central Intelligence Agency, unquote. And while the NSC has changed over the years, expanding and adopting new powers, at its core, it was the President, Vice President, Secretaries of State and Defense, the head of the CIA, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and a non-cabinet position called the National Security Advisor. Non-cabinet meaning that person is not confirmed by the Senate and is a creature of the President and the President alone. The National Security Advisor has tremendous influence over all aspects of national security.
What does that exactly mean?
Well, since anything and everything can and is tied to national security, any goddamn thing the White House wants it to mean. The National Security Advisor is one of the most powerful positions in the government, and at the same time, one of the least accountable people in the government. Look no further than Henry fucking Kissinger, who essentially ran the Vietnam War from 69 to 75, and you will see how powerful the position truly is. The National Security Council has a substantial White House staff, many of whom are active duty military or members of the various law enforcement and intelligence agencies, all under the authority of the National Security Advisor. The staff is ostensibly supposed to provide the subject knowledge over the myriad areas covered by the National Security Council, but it also provides the White House with their own private intelligence agency outside of the control of the Pentagon. The directors of the intelligence agencies and reporting directly to the President and through the National Security Advisor.
Is that a good idea?
Absolutely not, but hey, don't worry. The National Security Council is subject to strict oversight by the House and Senate intelligence communities, who you can rest assured are vigorous in their constitutional duties to ensure that the executive branch would never abuse the enormous amount of power placed in their hands, and keeps a close eye on the National Security Council to ensure that they are scrupulous in their observance of not only the written letter of the law, but the spirit in which the law was written.
Really? Are you sure?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you can't trust the president and Congress to do the right thing, then who can you trust, really? And so anyway, let me get on to the story about how the NSA and the NSC totally broke the law and concealed it from Congress and the American people. The reason I bring up the National Security Council is because our main villain in these episodes, and yeah, it's going to be two, worked for it, and was balls deep in everything we're discussing.
Oliver North.
Oliver Lawrence North, born in 1943 in San Antonio, Texas, to an Army major father and an Army wife mother, is one of those people whose dicks get really, really hard for America. To hear him tell it, he knew from the time he was shitting his diapers that he was going to be a goddamn Marine. And I have the highest affection, and yes, the highest respect for my Marine kin. After all, they do a job that I could never do, and even if I could do it, I wouldn't. However, there exists among Marines a certain group of people who transcend simply serving in the Marines and make being a Marine their entire personality. And frankly, those people are,
It's fucking tedious, this shit.
And Ollie was and is very much one of those guys. After attending the Naval Academy, North went to Vietnam as a platoon leader. I dug around to see if I could find what the enlisted men said about North's style of command, and found unsurprisingly words like zealot and scared the hell out of me used. Yet the overall picture of this command style was a hard-charging Marine who demanded discipline but took care of his troops. Nothing I read made him seem incompetent or uncaring, and he was indisputably brave. He earned 2 Purple Hearts, a Bronze Star, and a Silver Star with a Combat V for Valor, so whatever else Ollie did, he was, as they say, in the shit. When Vietnam ended, Ollie was
very unhappy.
He believed, like many other military officers, that if the civilian government had just shut the fuck up and let the military run the Vietnam War, things would have turned out much, much differently.
Is this correct?
Probably not, but hey, at least the civilian government kept Curtis LeMay from nuking Hanoi, which he very much wanted to do. North stayed on the peacetime officer path, staff jobs alternating with increasing levels of command until 1981. He was assigned as a major to the National Security Council staff. There are 2 kinds of officers that get a job like this: highly competent administrators who provide valuable subject matter expertise, and officers with strong political connections being groomed for higher office in either the Pentagon or civilian government. Ollie was the latter. From a Time magazine article in 1988, quote, "A select band of globe-trotting staffers of the National Security Council, the executive agency that coordinates U.S. defense and foreign affairs activities, known for its bravado and love of daring do. While the group is part of a crisis management team within the 46-person National Security Council staff, its freewheeling style has led Washington insiders to call its members cowboys. The most prominent is Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North. He's a deputy director for political military affairs on the NSC. A close friend and military comrade of former National Security Advisor Robert McFarlane, North arouses strong emotions in people. Nobody can be indifferent to Ollie, says the wife of a top foreign diplomat. Either you love him or you hate him with a passion. Since he joined the NSC in 1981, North has handled many highly sensitive missions. After the 1983 Beirut bombing that killed 241 U.S. Marines, North led a hunt for those responsible. The chief suspect, however, managed to escape. When the terrorists seized the Achille Lauro, a cruise ship off the coast of Egypt last year, North arranged a mid-air interception of the Egypt Air jet carrying Abdul Abbas, the mastermind of the hijacking. North helped plan the 1983 U.S. invasion of Grenada and last April's Libyan air raid, and it was not surprising when North turned up in Cyprus last week, just when released hostage David Jacobson arrived there. Oliver North is the prototype of the modern American hero, says a friend and colleague. Wherever and whenever Americans are in trouble, sooner or later, you will see him at the scene. Unquote. All of this is to explain why this relatively junior officer was at the heart of an international negotiation way beyond his pay grade and expertise. The first of which was going on in the Middle East.
Not them again.
I'm going to skip past a lot of stuff that's relevant, but it's also more than I can cover here, and I'm going to do a full show about it real soon.
I'll give you the short version.
Following the overthrow of the Shah in Iran, the influence of the Iranian government became ascendant in the Shia-dominated areas of the Middle East. Now, I almost tried to cover the distinction between the Shia and the Sunni in the history nugget of the show, but that's a way bigger topic than that. So suffice to say that the Shia are dominant in Iran and the Sunni dominant in the Arab countries, and in the border between the two, that's where they fight. The only thing the two do share is a mutual hatred of Israel and to a barely lesser extent, the United States. After the Iran hostage crisis ended, the various factions began to freelance kidnapping American and European people in Beirut, Lebanon for fun, profit, and politics. Hezbollah, an Iranian-backed group, was holding several American hostages, and this made Ronald Reagan sad. It's way beyond the ability of one Dick and Fart Joke podcast to cover the morass that was the Lebanese Civil War and the myriad groups snatching Westerners off the streets of Beirut, so I'm going to focus on the key names during the Reagan administration, first and foremost of which was William Buckley, the CIA station chief from Beirut, who was kidnapped in 1985.
That seems bad.
He was taken just outside his apartment when he was leaving for work, leaving without a security detail and with the warning that he was a target for kidnapping. Buckley was tortured and executed by his captors. Other hostages were David Dodge, Thomas Sutherland from the American University, Terry Anderson and Charles Glass, they was a news correspondent, Benjamin Weir and Lawrence Jacon, American clergy, and there were many, many others, and there were about 25 in total. But the families of the people I just mentioned were actively pressuring the government to get involved to get their loved ones back. However, the Reagan administration had a rock-solid policy. Under no circumstance would the United States ever negotiate with terrorists, except
when they do.
Reagan had campaigned against Carter over the handling of the Iran hostage crisis, and increasingly having Americans held hostage and him doing nothing began to look bad for him. And then Reagan met with some families, and him being the big old softy that he was, it soon became imperative that something be done to get the hostages back. And one man had a plan. A big, beautiful plan. A plan that simply could not go wrong. And that man was Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North. You see, Ollie had a guy, and this Iranian guy by the name of Manuka Ghorbanifar claimed that he could middleman a deal between Iranian moderates,
I don't think they exist,
and the United States for shipments of American weapons to Iran for use in their war against Iraq. Ghorbanifar claimed that through these moderates, arrangements could be made with Hezbollah, who were backed by the Iranians after all, to release some or all of the American hostages. So Ollie took this plan to his boss, National Security Advisor Robert McFarland, who took it to the president, and the president said,
"That sounds like a great idea."
Of course, it was illegal to sell arms to Iran, not to mention it was the stated policy of the Reagan administrations not to sell arms to either side of the Iran-Iraq war or trade arms for hostages, so North McFarland came up with kind of a workaround.
Technically speaking,
we would not be the ones selling said arms to Iran. Israel would. And then we would give new weapons to Israel to replace the ones that they sold to Iran. And also, since Iran was not again,
technically speaking,
holding the hostages themselves, we were not bargaining with terrorists, ergo,
technically speaking,
no law or policies had been violated, and everyone was legally, morally in the clear.
Right, yeah.
That's bullshit.
Well, yes, it is bullshit, but only, and I want to stress this, technically speaking. But friends, that bullshit sophistry wasn't the entire plan, because Ollie's big idea was even better. Remember last month when I talked about the Nicaraguan Contras?
Yes, I think I vaguely recall.
Well, the Contras had a problem. They needed money to do things like kill farmers, rape nuns, and purchase cocaine. And the money the United States had been giving them, money for the good work that they were doing in that area, suddenly stopped. You see, Congress did this crazy thing back in those days, their jobs, and for the first years of the Reagan administration, the president had been advocating for increasing American involvement in the Nicaraguan Civil War because communism. Congress, many of whom were elected in the years following the last war America did because of communism, were justifiably reluctant to start another one, and they passed a law that forbade the United States from providing military aid of any kind to the Contras and restricted cash payments for quote-unquote humanitarian purposes, authorizing only actual humanitarian goods like food and medicine. The Reagan administration was not happy about this, and Ollie North in particular was incensed. To his way of thinking, this was just another in a long series of betrayals by Congress to the brave freedom fighters keeping the forces of the Reds from invading America. So Ollie had been devising a workaround for this problem as well. In this workaround, he would say,
"Fuck Congress," and
do it himself. It all began with rich Republicans. The sort of people that have a lot of money and really loved America. Loved America so much that they would give money to do things like fight jungle wars in Central America. After all, you can only buy so many mansions and,
all the poor people I could help with all my money.
Seemed like a bad investment. The problem with wars is that they are really expensive, and the people Ollie was hitting up for donations were rich, but not like Jeff Bezos rich. He needed to tap a source with the kind of money that $10 or $20 million worth of sort of things they found just
and in between our couch cushions.
And that kind of money in the mid-1980s was found in only one place.
You made a deal with a fucking drug cartel?
No, of course not. Now, look, Ollie would cut a deal with Middle Eastern terrorists, but never with a drug cartel. No, Ollie went to the oil cartels like any good American would. Quoting from the Middle East Research and Information Project, quote, "The Contras finally used up the last of the $24 million Congress granted them in December of 1983 for fiscal year 84. McFarlane went begging to Bandar. Bandar is the U.S. ambassador from Saudi Arabia, the long-running U.S. ambassador. I think he might still be, noting that it was almost inevitable that the administration would fail on Capitol Hill to win more aid. Bandar was now more amenable. His government had agreed to pay the Contras a rate of $1 million a month. McFarlane notified Reagan, who in turn sent back a note which expressed the president's satisfaction and pleasure that this had occurred. McFarlane also informed Vice President George Bush of the secret deal for third-party funding of the Contras, unquote. All in all, the Saudis donated $32 million over the course of Ollie's big idea to keep the Contras afloat. The Saudis and other Gulf nations didn't do this out of their deep and abiding friendship or their belief in the Contras. They did it to keep America sweet and to keep U.S. arms flowing into their countries as well. This donation was not exactly illegal, but it wasn't exactly legal either. The law Congress passed specified that the U.S. officials were not supposed to lobby other nations to directly support the Contras military efforts. But they worked around this by not giving the money directly to the Contras. Instead, they used the money to establish a slush fund for shell corporations who, with the help of the CIA, would then use private individuals, all of whom were former U.S. military or CIA officers, to get the arms and equipment to the Contras, thereby creating a plausible, if flimsy, firewall around the law.
And this works.
Better than it should have. However, even with these funds flowing in, Ollie wanted more. And that is where the Iranian arms cell met the Contras war in one big, glorious clusterfuck. The arms the U.S. was illegally selling to Iran were not direct deals from one government to another.
No, of course not.
From the beginning, they were arranged through international arms merchants, the largest of which was a Saudi by the name of Adnan Khashoggi. And this dude was a lot. This is from his obit in the New York Times that sums up his life. Quote, "One biography of him was titled The Richest Man in the World, and he was often described that way. It was not strictly accurate, but during the early 1980s, his wealth, estimated to be in the low billions, placed him in a tiny elite. His appetites were gargantuan beyond the limits of vulgarity. At the peak of his wealth, he presided over 12 estates, including some in Europe and the Middle East, a 180,000-acre ranch in Kenya, and a 2-floor Manhattan residence at the Olympic Towers next to St. Patrick's Cathedral on 5th Avenue. That was made from 16 existing apartments. He owned a 280-foot yacht, the Nabila, that was used in James Bond film and later sold to, surprise, Donald J. Trump, and 3 lavishly retrofitted commercial-sized jets. His parties were known for rivers of champagne, bevies of women, international celebrities, and endless personal attention from the host, known to his many friends as AK. For AK, there were no laws, no skies, and no limits, unquote. If you're wondering, of course Khashoggi was featured on that staple of 80s capitalist wank fest lifestyles of the rich and famous. Think about that for a second. And acknowledged, he was open about the fact that he was an international arms merchant, was featured on an American television show about masturbatory capitalism. That, my friends, is the fucking 80s, all wrapped up in a bow for you. Through Khashoggi, North was connected through a series of smaller arms merchants, including the Iranian Gurbanifar, who made the actual purchases of the weapons from various sources around the world, all of whom were U.S. clients, most notably Israel. It was illegal for those states to sell U.S. weapons to countries like Iran, so they sold them, with the full knowledge of the White House, to intermediary arms merchants who sold them to Iran with a significant markup, tens of millions of dollars over the sticker price.
I'd be willing to pay anything above sticker price.
And then that markup was split between the arms dealer and Ollie's Contra program, pumping another $15 million in what North was calling Operation Democracy. Over the course of the deal, Iran purchased 2,500 state-of-the-art anti-tank missiles, which took a terrible toll on Iraqi tanks and vehicles and allowed Iran to copy the technology for their own variant of the missile, which they still use today. They also picked up 18 air-to-ground missile systems with a large number of spare parts for missile systems, a euphemism for more missiles for the actual fucking launchers. Iran wanted American weapons because they had a massive stockpile of American weapons from when the Shah, a long American puppet, was overthrown by the Ayatollah Khomeini in the 70s, and the U.S. slapped an arms embargo on Iran after the hostage crisis that was still very much in place. When someone sold Iran all those U.S. weapons. The funny part was the U.S. was totally being swindled by Ghorbanifar, who was the go-to guy for the entire deal and had been lying all along. There were no Iranian moderates, and the hostages would not be released in exchange for one or two small shipments. It took years and multiple shipments to get back most, but not all the hostages in Lebanon. But at least the money kept flowing into Operation Democracy. Look, I've been blaming North for all of this because fuck him, but he wasn't doing this alone. 2 national security advisors, the director of the CIA, the secretaries of state and defense, and the attorney general, vice president, and the fucking president all knew about these deals. Not all of them knew where the money was being diverted to the Contras, but Reagan did, though he would experience numerous senior moments when he was asked about it after the fact. And everything about the plan was at least against policy, and the counterparts were out and out fucking illegal. But Ollie's big idea was working, at least at its most basic level. We got a few hostages, and the Contras got a shitload of money, and no one was the wiser. That was until everything unexpectedly and dramatically came apart all at once and blew the fuck up in the Reagan administration's face. And for the first time, the Teflon president found himself very much with egg stuck all over him, and it damn near brought down his presidency. And that is where we will pick up next week for part 2 of Ollie's Big Idea.
This episode is brought to you by MeUndies. Underwear drawers are like the Wild West. You never know what you're going to pull out or what shape it's in. So upgrade your collection with the buttery soft comfort of MeUndies. MeUndies' signature fabric is as soft as a warm hug from your favorite sweater. Plus, it's breathable and oh so comfy, making it ideal for all-day wear. Get 20% off your first order, plus free shipping at MeUndies.com/Spotify with code SPOTIFY. That's MeUndies.com/Spotify, code SPOTIFY.
Running a business comes with a lot of what-ifs. But luckily, there's a simple answer to them. Shopify. It's the commerce platform behind millions of businesses, including Thrive Cosmetics and Momofuku, and it'll help you with everything you need. From website design and marketing to boosting sales and expanding operations, Shopify can get the job done and make your dream a reality. Turn those what-ifs into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
That is it for the show this week. Pod friends, if you think this has all been dense, I want you to know I have pared this down to its very basic elements. I left out so many subplots, side quests, and crazy asides along the way. I've been deep in this book called Landslide by Jane Mayer, which details the entire thing, and good God, these fucking idiots were actually running the government. Some of that will be covered next week, but mostly it'll be about the follow-up, the cover-up, and how senile Reagan was by the end of his term, so you'll want to come back for that. Speaking of mentally challenged, rate and review this show so other people can find us, take a listen, and wonder what my mental defect might be. Kick us $1 at patreon.com/whatthehellpodcast. Use the website, not the app, and all that money is used to fund anti-communist activities in Central America. Do all the things Jeremy tells you to do in the closing credits, otherwise he will be forced to officially notice our funding freedom fighters in Costa Rica. And so for me, Dave, setting out for Biafra Bledsoe, producer,
we had nothing to do with the Congolese Civil War. That was all. You blame the Belgians for that.
Gavin, and all the fictional headless CIA operatives on the show, we want to say it's so hard to find an honest arms merchant anymore. And we'll see you all next week.
What the Hell Were You Thinking stars Dave Bledsoe and features Gavin St. James and several fictional minions. The show is produced by Kimberly Steele and a part of the Seltzer Kings podcast network. You can find more information on the show on their website, whatthehellpodcast.com, or on Facebook as What the Hell Podcast. Thanks for listening.
I have no ending for this, so I take a small bow.
Total senility.
Seltzer Kings
Podcasts.